Hello, and welcome to the last part of the events from Söder Malmö and Gamla stan that formed political changes. In 1917, 3 years into the First World War, was a time of despair. The war was raging, and a serious problem of starvation had spread throughout Sweden due to the lack of food. Rations were set in place in the beginning of the year. However, as the year continued, the food resources continued to decrease. Rations got lowered. Bread rations of 250 slowly decreased to 200 grams per person per day in April. The reason why Sweden had such a serious starvation was due to the food that was produced was either sold to Germany and other countries. Due to our businesses with Germany, Britain stopped their trade with us as well. The Potato Revolution was inspired by 2 months prior February Revolution in Russia that changed the situation for the people there. The Potato Revolution was also intended by primarily the women who got tired of not being able to feed their kids at home. As a result of the men being sent to a standby case in Sweden would get dragged into the war, the women were left to take care of the families as well as take over a lot of work areas that were previously dominated by men. This radical food rationing left women fed up with the new rules, since they performed equally as heavy labor as the men have their entire families to feed, but yet they got less and less food. The Swedish citizens had had enough with the rations, so for a time period of 10 days in April 1917, 100,000 people all over Sweden demonstrated in the closest city. These protests were called the Hunger Demonstrations. And since the rationing was a problem all over Sweden, there was roughly about 50 cities that had demonstrations in them. The hunger demonstrations did not all happen at the same time. However, the protests were spread out and happened over several occasions. The first hunger demonstration took place in Västervik, which is a 3-hour drive south from Stockholm. The purpose behind the march was to lower the price of milk produce. However, the demand of 8-hour work hours as well as a higher salary was also a demand of the purpose. Nytorget in Stockholm, where we are currently standing, was a marketplace in 1917 where multiple of riots took place, also protesting against the lack of food and for the right to vote. The protest towards the right to vote was for the common folk did not have the same rights as the upper class did. There was a lack of both seeds, grains, and milk produce, which was one reason to why people were rioting. For instance, this resulted in a large demonstration of workers military and lower class people who had worked from Södermalm to who walked from Södermalm to Torsgatan to the milk center. If you would like now to start walking towards Södermalmsgatan 50, where we will explain more exactly why people were upset and how they reacted. It was usual for marketers hide and handpick people who they wanted to sell their food to, resulting in women marching the streets and raiding and vandalizing the stores for food. It was not stealing, however, for the women that did this didn't leave the payment. However, they took the food against the owner's will.
In 2018, Södermannagatan 33 is renumbered as Södermannagatan 50, and that is where I hope you're standing right now. The pizzeria across the street is warmly recommended if wanting to catch a bite while listening to the last part of this audio guide. In 1917, at a time of the most serious starvation in Sweden and Stockholm, it appeared a rumor that seller Karlsson on Södermannagatan 33 had potatoes. Thousands of women were soon on the location, and they demanded that Karlsson would sell them his stock of potatoes. Karlsson wanted to save his sacks of potatoes to his best customers and denied having any. Another raid was performed, and the women simply took them from him and left money. However, the rest of the women did not believe that it was the only potatoes he had, so they continued to search his store. The police had been called to the place, and it ended up with several arrests and a total of 8 people being sent to labor camps. The police continued the use of violence as they stabbed, whipped, and slashed their way through the masses to transport the arrested people to jail. A woman named Claire was arrested and held responsible as the leader for the commotion due to shouting for help when arrested. She was together with other women sentenced to pay a heavy fine, and some others were arrested and served time in jail. On the 5th of June in 1917, the final big demonstration that year was held in Stockholm at Gustav Adolfs torg. 30,000 people gathered together to protest for everybody's equal right to vote. Some people were in fairness only there to listen to what the Prime Minister had to say about Hjalmar Branting's question to the Parliament, and some others were there out of sheer curiosity for what was happening. Some sort of chaos was unleashed, and the police used violence to control the masses to ensure that they did not reach the House of Parliament. On Gustav Adolfs torg, about 30 people got stabbed by sables, and both women and children were downridden by the police horses. All of these demonstrations led to a political change in Sweden. The year after, on November 10th in 1918, a demonstration was arranged with 10,000 participants as a reminder of the Hungary demonstrations the year before. At that time, they were still demanding general and equal voting rights and only 8 hours of work. After this demonstration, the leading Right Bloc party in the first chamber of parliament accepted their basic terms on one condition: if the monarchy was preserved. Hjalmar Branting, leader of the Social Democrats then, agreed to that term. This was the start of power for the Social Democrats, and later in the 1930s leaving them with the power for almost 40 years. Håkan Blomqvist, a historian at Södertörns högskola, argues that he can see clear connections between the protests in 1917 and 2017, 100 years later. The same engagement and will to change the situations are still present, for example, the issue of refugees and their rights in Sweden today. Håkan Blomqvist also released a book in 2017 called Potatisrevolutionen och kvinnoupploppet på Södermalm 1917, in which he retells the story of the events that, in his opinion, shaped the Swedish democracy. The events regarding the Potato Revolution and the hunger demonstrations led to changes still lasting today. Their struggle to achieve equal voting rights are still paid off, as all Swedish citizens today has the privilege to vote. The 8-hour workday was indeed changed and kept as promised by Hjalmar Branting and has been continued to be in effect until today. Up until the release of this book, the Potato Revolution remains largely unknown, perhaps because it was never identified as an actual revolution. The government did never truly lose control of the people, since they had the opportunity to control the food rations. This is the story of women who got tired of starving and in a way mobilized all working people to come together and seize their place in Sweden as a democracy.